Anastasia. I have been in go-to-market for over 12 years now. Started my career in a full-service agency, went over then to various startups and scale-ups where I was heading growth. I was also on venture capital side, working for Project A Ventures as a marketing leader there. And I'm making sure that the portfolio companies of this venture capital fund were successful in Germany and beyond. So bringing quite some experience. And a couple of years ago, Norman and I, we founded B2B Practitioners, which helps with everything go-to-market related. Happy to be here.
I assume I take over. Hello, everybody. I'm Norm. And maybe the important part about me, my secret superpower, I always say, is strategic product marketing. So I really try to understand the interplay between customer competition and the company or your product. So this actually helps. I earned, I think, my skills at Google, where I was literally doing the internationalization into Asia Pacific, into Latin America. And then I think now 7 years ago, I came back to Germany, and ever since I've been working with German companies, but also companies internationally that want to come into the German market. So I have quite some experience from knowing how to internationalize myself, but also how to bring companies into Germany.
Yeah, so the first question was around what do companies really need to know to succeed in the German market? What are biggest misunderstandings we see? I think there's different dimensions to it, and I would start with like general market mindset and trust baseline, so to speak. So I think generally the German market is more conservative. So they definitely look at proof first, are very, very skeptical around products, especially alpha versions of the product. So if you're going into that market, make sure there is a working product in place, right? Or something that they can get value from. And then, so it also works, right? Once it's specified. So we have had a very interesting example working for Overall, which is a location marketing platform, where they had to take on a US competitor that came with like very flashy US marketing, right, into the market. And at some point, customers were really seeing through this whole US marketing buzz that US companies like to show. Another thing I would say is the self-education before the actual contact with sales. So buyers today in Germany really want to research on their own. Especially, I mean, this is maybe less so in like very high. If you have like decision maker like CTOs, etc., they are more reactive. But generally, there's a tendency for buyers to talk to sales later in the process, right? So that means they research themselves and they want to see certain trust signals, certain certifications, example, customers that are from the local market, maybe a local entity when you're in the enterprise space. One example from our work has been that talent acquisition suite in the HR space, they basically coming from the traditional mid-market and doing the very traditional sales approach, they launched a self-service product for the customers to actually experience, right, and to be able to check it out and research on themselves, and then only talk to sales. So quite an interesting trend there. Another thing is that privacy and security are very, very important in Germany. So you might need to host in Germany or in the EU You have to definitely make sure that GDPR foundations are in place, that you have a data privacy officer if you're more than 20 people located in Germany, and if you're working with sensitive data. There's obviously now new regulations coming, so we have also a trend there for more compliance topics like NIS2, which is in the cybersecurity space, to make sure that companies are protected from cyber attacks. We have, of course, the AI Act, where the EU tries to make sure that personal data is not used for LLMs. So I think this is another super important thing. We have seen, for example, in our work with customers, that a compliance platform that we've been working with, they moved basically everything from AWS to a European cloud provider, and that was obviously also because of customer requirements. There's also something like the Betriebsrat, Works Council, that you might come across. They are usually not super involved in the sales process, but they might play a role when you are trying to sell in Germany. In general, I think we're also much heavier on the whole anti-bribery and compliance topics. The US company that has sent out expensive giveaways, there was one example that didn't really work well with the prospects in Europe. So you might also need to be aware of this law. And that's on the kind of broader or more general market mindset. I think Norm has a lot to say about geography and regional nuances, because Germany is like also sometimes not one market.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite critical. If you look at the many countries around Germany, they have one central hub. So if you're in France, there's Paris. If you're in the UK, there's London. But Germany, we're actually quite regional, decentralized, regional distributed. So it depends a lot on what kind of business you want to do when you enter the market. So, for example, if you are focused on machinery or an automotive industry, southern Germany, so the Stuttgart area, is very important because there you have all the big players. So one of the companies we worked with, SpareTech, they were basically focused on the maintenance area, and they, starting in Stuttgart, actually helped them to create all the valuable pilots that they needed with some of the biggest companies in the space. If you focus on media, then Berlin is really a nice hub because you have a lot of the software and media companies there. So if you are on Industry 4.0, then Munich or Aachen are quite important. So you really need to think about. So what I notice, a lot of companies come in and say, "Oh, we want to be in Berlin because it's the hip place," and that works for a lot of the SaaS companies. And Berlin is super successful there. But for certain specialty, even from if it's biopharmaceutical, if it's rocket or aerospace engineering, there may be different places. So really be conscious, understanding where your peers or where your ecosystem is based in Germany. The second thing that I would like to look at is also digital maturity. That's probably not a problem if you want to sell to SaaS or IT companies or to the typical, what I call the millennial bubble, but be aware that the mid-market can be quite traditional in their appearance, particularly when you are outside of the big cities. So if you're in the big cities, you probably have people who study to work even let's say in accounting or in HR. But once you get outside of the big cities, then you might actually deal with people who might not speak German. oh, sorry, who might not speak English, they expect you to speak German, or they understand you, but they don't feel comfortable responding to you in English. So really be aware, who do you want to target? What's your audience? How they actually react? Yeah. I think another very, very important aspect that Anastasia is going to talk to is ideal customer profile. So, like I said, our background is strategic product marketing, and we often encounter that people who want to succeed in Germany don't really understand their ideal customer and the personas in the loop. Anastasia, maybe you can give some examples or outline.
Yeah, I think we also asked in the beginning or in the survey, who are you selling to? So 26% are selling to corporates, 19% to SMEs. We have B2C, public sector. So I think it's super important that you understand, are you more in the SME, so small to medium-sized companies, and how this is defined is a little bit different depending on what source you use. But for example, you can use Statistisches Bundesamt. They for example define it in different buckets, from like small to medium size, and depending on the revenue and on the number of employees. There's also LinkedIn company codes. So really try to understand, are you in the really small companies or mid-market or enterprise space? And you need to look at obviously a number of or revenue sizes, a number of employees, but also other signals, like for example, which tech stack are they using? Is there any other interesting positive or negative signals? So you can at least compile your list of potential target companies, and obviously this will also determine how the buyer decision process looks like, and how many stakeholders are involved, how long your sales cycle will be, etc. And obviously, smaller companies buy very, very different than mid-market or large enterprise.
Let me get into that quickly, Anastasia. Because I think that's for the people interesting here. They're understanding what German mid-market or German enterprise is. So, like as Norman said, for the audience, it's different. Could you say is there a rule of thumb how to define that? How to really see? Because for some mid-market companies, it's 1,000 employees, others do 500. Is there any recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, there are. I think you also have to look at how. From what number of employees or revenue size, or also at other signals, right? So there might be signals like, for example, we had with an HR, the talent suite that I was talking about. They also looked at whether the company has an HR department, right? Or if they have a VP of talent acquisition, and this can only happen from, or obviously for larger companies, right? But typically, you say heavy enterprise is beyond 5,000 employees. And then smaller companies is something between like 1 and 50 employees. Then you have the mid-market, can start around 200 to 1,000. That's roughly how we define it. But I would not just look at a number of employees or revenue, but also other signals that might be relevant for your business.
So
Definitely, you're addressing something. Sorry for interrupting. That's quite for this audience. Don't be confused. There are actually huge companies that still call themselves family companies or Mittelstand. So Bosch or a Wirth or whatever, it's billion-dollar companies. They are gigantic, but they consider themselves Mittelstand. So you really need to understand what segment of the market you want to address. So it's best to really do concise description of hey, my software is best for the sole office, and you think about your own software and think where it's appropriate. Otherwise, you can get pretty quickly lost in how to target a market.
Okay, thanks for summarize. So the first thing that the attendees here should understand, we Germans are, as our cliches are, yeah. So we need trust. We love it very thorough, yeah. We do not like to have an overly excessive use of adverbs. Is that correct?
That's so we don't like hyperbole. So try to abstain. Be driven by the fact. Don't talk like an American press release. So that's the most that makes people suspicious. Route the value and your communication and value, and provide proof points. And that doesn't mean that you can't, if you know the qualified sales leader by John McMahon, that you sell the carrot in the ocean, but you have to ultimately deliver on it. And my experience is the patience runs out after 1.5 years. That's when you suddenly see then the spike in churn. So it's not like that you can indefinitely deliver an inferior product.
Okay. And if you have to put down the top 5 mistakes that in your experience you saw companies do when they try to enter the German market, could you name them?
Anastasia, do you want?
Yeah, I can start. So I think for once it's ignoring the local competition. So what we have seen, for example, when you are, certain industries are very, very particular, and you have local players for most of them, right? So take, for example, the ERPs the ERP market. You have local players here, you have totally different players in the US. So you will have to check, okay, am I actually competing against in the German market, and it can be very different than your local market. And then you have to obviously position yourself against those competitors and not the ones that are in your local market. The other one, I think, is ignoring this whole security, legal, and data topics. So you have to take a couple of weeks, I think, to set that up. And also keep in mind that there are certain personas in the sales process, like the data privacy officer, the security officers or IT, that will check if it's a software product, check very thoroughly if it's compliant, and they can use it, right? So where is it hosted? How is data being processed, etc., etc. So I think that's definitely those mistakes we've seen a lot.
You've given 2, then let me throw in 3 others. I think the biggest one that I see is simply using their sales playbooks from abroad. They just think this works. And just to give you a small note there, Germany is one of 2 markets that still works for direct mail, so sending letters for Google. So I just discussed it a few weeks ago with a friend of mine, and I can attest to it. The second thing that I see quite often is not localizing for Germany. So particularly if you want to sell, so either you decide that I can speak to people in English, then do it, but please don't use machine translation for German. We can see through it. Translation tools are not yet as good. And the last thing that I just experienced that's more in the enterprise space, a company, because their local home lawyer told them about the German employment law and that you can't fire people, they decided not to set up a local entity. And now they lost a really, really big deal. So we're talking 7 digits, because the feedback they were given is, well, you don't have a local entity. We don't like to sign contract with an American company. So really figure out what you want to do. And most importantly, it's okay if you ask your friends in your home country about what the legal situation or whatever is, but verify with someone who knows Germany. So be it Sven's organization or so on, because labor law, if you just get started, is actually not as bad. So, but they were completely confused because of this only. So really, that's probably my top three that I would throw into the mix.
Okay, totally agree. And now that I know what I cannot do, is there any framework that you would recommend for an ambitious company to enter the German market? Any best practices?
Yeah, so typically we talk about the 3 Cs that Norman mentioned. Our framework that we use: customer, competition, and company. So customers, really think about the ideal customer profile that you're targeting. I just put also some links into the chat where you can see how Statistisches Bundesamt is defining small and medium-sized companies, but really don't stop there, right? Look at what tech stack do they need. We look at positive and negative signals. So there might be, for example, something like the mid-market in the HR space, for example, is quite conservative when it comes to using certain software, right? And we had, for example, a customer that was selling BAV, so pension plan software, and they needed the company to already have something like Personio, so a general HR software to manage their human resources. And they found out that the mid-market is quite behind, right, and still kind of implementing the software, but they obviously, then this was a positive signal. They already had a software like Personio. They could go into that, or they could pursue the company as a potential lead. So look really at other signals as well. Then the other thing is, and customer, by the way, also involves which personas you're talking to, right? So really try to look at the buyer decision process. How do we typically do it? Is we go and conduct interviews with potential customers or existing customers, where we find out, okay, how do people actually buy? And this can be very different from, as I mentioned, enterprise versus mid-market versus small sized companies. And typically what you then see when you do these type of interviews, you see that there's certain personas involved that you haven't thought about, right? And this is how you then adjust your sales process, where you say, okay, I have, for example, compliance people or data privacy officer or someone from IT to check security. So I will have to include that in my sales process to make sure I have that covered. And then the second thing is competition. As I mentioned, look at local competition, conduct your research here. What are potential customers considering? So who are you playing against, right? Because this is important for your positioning. It will define your strategy, how you communicate on your website, what your USPs are, etc., etc. So really look into that. And company is the product. So typically we look at then, okay, how do you package the product, right? Are you going as one of our customers as a platform and positioning yourself as a platform, or are you trying to break down as another customers of ours into certain packaged point solutions? And then obviously the pricing is also important. So are you, first of all, are you freemium? Are you a freemium version, or do you let people test your product for a couple of weeks? And then, what are your, so to speak, pricing strategies? What's the value metric that you're using to price? And we have with AI, of course, that changes a lot. So it used to be seat-based. Now it's very much usage-based. And I think once you have that, Norm can talk a little bit about like what go-to-market motions make sense, right? Once you have those foundations set in place.
Well, I quickly go to the question in the chat. Delma, Germans appreciate the effort that people try to speak our language. As and Anastasia and Norman mentioned before, there is a big trust issue or like a trust component when you try to sell to German, especially in the enterprise market. And my recommendation is, if you're not really 100% well spoken in German, I would keep to your mother tongue, rather than mixing that up. And if you have written communication, I would also not mix it up. But it really depends what Norman said. Look at the buyer. So there's probably also a variation, when it comes to industry, and like there's more modern industries than an automotive manufacturer. He's probably different coming from the Stuttgart area. So also here, no one fits it all. But trust is definitely one of the selling points, and trust is also given by not making mistakes in writing and in spelling. That would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I provided an example in the chat, so I would consider myself a pretty decent German speaker.
You're okay, Norman.
When I wrote a copy for automotive dealerships, the owners of those dealerships came back to me, did an English person write this?
Yeah.
And maybe I spent 17 years of my life outside of Germany, but it's not as bad. So I think there's certain industries that are very digital. I would really think about how's the industry. So one of our biggest customers is a US unicorn. They are selling in the media space. They can do everything in English. Of course, when we meet the people, we still have German copy, but another company we are selling in, or we're helping to sell in the really the traditional mid-market, and as Germany is a must, you can't. German is a must. You can't. The audience wouldn't understand you, and they will. I think one of the big advantages that we worked out with this company is that we offer German support out of Germany. So that's maybe another adjacent thing. If you really want to sell in this segment, they often want to have local support. So that is actually a nice segue to this go-to-market topic again, because one of the things where Anastasia and I were active in when we're active in the ESP space for smaller companies, they want local support. So when we often heard, well, we selected you because your next support partner is within 1 hour car drive. So that's if you want to really. So I think if I cluster it, it's a bit like, I would say there is the Soho space. I would even throw in the SaaS companies. Everyone has high tech affinity. You don't need anything in Germany as long as you have the support covered. Then you have the people who are more traditional or mid-sized companies. They will be very adamant about having someone who can support them, who can speak their language. And that might even be that you need to get the jargon right. That's actually, I think, where most translation programs fail. They get the words right, but not how a person would really talk. And then you have the bigger companies, and there it depends on the support level, but they typically want to have at least a contract with a German entity because they are legally liable by so many. So I think for them, it's a matter of compliance, and you can actually charge a lot more. So taking the Riverside example, which is actually nowadays, if you buy a small license for yourself, you pay 120 euros a year. If you buy the enterprise version, you suddenly pay 20 or 30,000 a year. And that the only difference is basically GDPR.
Okay, good. Is there any example that you would like to add to this context that makes it more feasible for the attendees?
I think I can illustrate. I use some examples to illustrate, but I would. We have a number of examples in the case. Like I said, let's go back to this American company that I just talked about that didn't have the entity. There was a deliberate decision why we first started with a local contractor and set it up in this context, but mainly because there was a huge resistance on the side of the American company to set up a German entity, which also resulted in the end They wanted to succeed in the enterprise sector. They had a 7-digit deal in negotiation, but they didn't set up the entity. But nonetheless, from a risk profile, if this is what you want, starting with a contractor was actually a good way. We assembled a team, we positioned the company, but you really need to understand, I think what wasn't really understood is how vital to succeed in the enterprise space is having a German entity, and it doesn't entail a lot of risk or investment. It's actually pretty straightforward, and I would even say can be easily done in any bigger cities. I actually like being there in Berlin. That's actually also where the infrastructure is pretty good. So maybe I would actually encourage the audience to come up with their own company. Hey, we are in this space. What can we do? Delma, I looked you up, and sorry for giving away. I don't know who you sell to, but I could imagine that with what you sell, you get away with English, unless you really want to sell into the hardcore space. So I don't know who's your buyer. Maybe you can type it in. We talk specifically about your case afterwards.
Okay, and we prepared a little bit. Can you explain to the attendees what a channel motion here is in Germany and how that works, how system houses work in Germany? Is there anything we have to give them as advice?
Yeah, I think probably need Anastasia, I'll let you afterwards add, because you've done quite a bit on this. Depends a bit on the model that you're running. So I think you first need to understand what the channel partner is supposed to do for you. Are they distribution partner? Are they service partner? Are they simply co-marketing partner? So co-marketing is typically where you either just pay for MQS generated, or you start with co-marketing webinars. That's the lowest barrier. I think the next, in my opinion, is actually service partner, but you need to train them. Why service partner? Lower barrier, because as a service partner, you don't need them to sell. They just get something from you. But once you get in sales, you need to train them as a sales partner as well. And then you have the pure distribution partners, where you really sell into something like a retail chain, or you attach yourself to an IT company. Anastasia, can you outline, because you also currently work with a bigger US company?
Yeah, we have a customer that is actually providing a software for managed service providers. So yeah, IT Dienstleister, like IT service providers, and they then of course have to go through Systemhäuser, so-called Systemhäuser, because most companies buy, or yes, especially smaller companies do the whole IT infrastructure through these little shops, or there's also bigger Systemhäuser, but typically you would then, if you want to purchase any software around your business, you would go through this Systemhaus that is, or the MSP that is managing your IT infrastructure. So I think again, think about once, if you're conducting interviews, try to always ask for a buyer decision process. So how does your target customer buy? Is it through partners, or is it, for example, we have also an example that some smaller companies go through something like telecom, right? So they're a telecom provider. So that might be a potential partner for you then. But I think that's important to keep in mind. Okay, what's my ideal customer process? How do they buy? Like, do they really go direct? Do they research for solutions directly? Then an inbound motion might be, or a paid motion might be more relevant for you. But if they buy through already a partner that they have, someone that is managing their IT infrastructure, or their telecom provider, or whatnot, or their bank, right? Then that is offering additional services. Then that might be a valid strategy for you. But partner strategy is, of course, always kind of very lengthy to set up. So typically, but it can be, of course, a good starting point into the German market. So you don't start from like from scratch and trying to go for companies directly. Then there's also the outbound strategy. I think some of you asked for cost-effective strategies for startups or most effective prospecting strategy for LinkedIn. So outbound is, of course, pretty cost-effective. So what do we mean by outbound is you basically create your list of target accounts, right? So the small or mid-size or enterprise companies with X revenue, with X employees, with other signals like technographics, firmographics, etc. And then you do direct outreach via email, via phone. So it's cost effective, yes, because we have a lot of tools to automate. We have a lot of databases to get the contacts. At the same time, everyone is doing it at the moment because it's cost effective. A lot of companies are doing it very poorly because they are not personalizing in a good way. So I get emails every day selling me whatever, which is not relevant for me at all. So be aware of automation. And then also in Germany, again, GDPR, you need a reason to reach out directly. Otherwise, you can also get banned and get to pay fees for GDPR non-compliance. So an example here would be, again, this compliance platform that was doing outbound calling, so cold calling. They actually were looking at the imprints of companies and were detecting errors in those imprints. Or in this data privacy statements, and then we're basically calling the company saying, look, you have some errors in your data privacy statement, can we help you? So this would be possible, but you can't just call if you don't have a reason, or email if you don't have a reason. You would need to have a consent to do that.
Okay, can I add two things on that? Can you rate, is price the best way to speak to an enterprise customer, or is value the better approach? What would you recommend?
I'll let Norman answer that.
It's a difficult one. Sorry, Norman. Yeah.
So you ask about what's the value or price?
No, it's like I'm a seller. Yeah, I try to get into German enterprise account. Should I just bluntly go and say I'm cheaper than the competitor, or should I approach it with I give you more value for your money? What would you recommend as a better strategy to speak to a buyer in Germany?
Okay, so I already said sales qualified leaders. I'm a fan of value-based selling.
Okay.
But don't expect, so it depends a bit. I've seen some people from the Ukraine. Yeah, Germany is a good country to sell for them. The economic environment is currently not conducive for charging high premiums. That one I would say. So people are negotiating tough. So my neighbor, actually, I'm based in Munich. My neighbor works as the chief controller of the purchasing department of BMW.
Okay.
And BMW has a target right now of saving 1 billion. So everyone is trying to cut. Deals are currently delayed because they get negotiated over and over again. So always keep some money. But I wouldn't bluntly go in and say, hey, I want to sell on price. You need to differentiate yourself. So that's the whole purpose of product marketing. Find out what's your strong suite, how you can be different and focus the discussion on those points. So there's an interesting example just from last week. So actually here, the company where I'm currently in, we've lost a deal that we actually had already verbal. And what our competitor had done very smoothly is they had shifted discussion from the core need that the customer actually needed to something adjacent where they were actually the leader in the industry. The customer came to us, oh, we bought this, we realized this feature is a lot more important to us. No, it was not important, but the competitor was actually really smart in changing. So really find out where you are unique, pitch this and address all the personas, and then you can still say, oh, there's an advantage on the pricing, but I don't think you will win on the pricing. What I typically actually see is that particularly American companies are higher priced than Germans and still win because they are better at selling. So for me, it's also not an argument. I'm not sure whether there are some software development companies here, but I get about 5 emails every day or every week telling me, oh, do you want to work with my development team in Ukraine, Romania, India, Pakistan, whatever? No, because pitch me the process. Everyone already got burned with working with someone. So pitch me the process why it doesn't fail with you.
Okay, and can you elaborate a little bit on the sales cycle in Germany? Can you share some insights?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting topic. It depends again on the segment. But in general, if I distinguish, and sorry that I always use the US versus Europe, it's probably, I think with Asia, it's similar. I spent enough time in Asia. The sales cycles in Europe and Asia are longer than the US. So in the US, I experienced people, they put 200,000 on a credit card without a buyer consortium. In Germany, it really depends on who you sell to. And let me use the BMW example. At BMW, you're going to go through an RFP process from 50,000 euro onwards. Now, Mercedes, 500,000. So it depends even on the company it's not even restrictive. So it depends really on the situation. But I would expect longer sales cycles. I would expect a lot more stakeholders. So you will have even people who you never heard about, like Betriebsrat, Workers' Council, or GDPR legal will have, or even when you think everything is done, suddenly purchasing comes in. So expect that it takes a lot longer, but you craft also a lot more valuable relationships. So it's not like that someone's going to kick you out at some point, but they want you to deliver. If you promise something, they want you to deliver it.
Okay, great. We're going slowly to the end of the webinar. For the people in the chat or in the webinar, please add your questions. And to wrap it up, can you, and I know it's a very difficult question, Anastasia, so sorry, yeah, but can you share the 5 takeaways like that everybody should have on top of their mind when they get out of this webinar?
Sure. I think we have until 10:30, right? Sven, I think we have a bit more time.
We have time, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
we actually we have a raised hand from Ishan, I think. Yeah. So
yes, please. Thank you very much.
We can squeeze him in.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me loud and clear? Hi.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes, please. Thank you very much for this session. I'm Wally. I'm based here in Bremen, in Germany, to be precise. I am a specialist in go-to-market as well as strategic business development. I just wanted to know, you have spoken about how you help companies establish in Germany. Is it also something you can do to help companies who are in Germany who want to move into other markets like the African market where I cover 19 countries? That's my question. Thank you. Over.
Did I understand correctly? So moving from Germany to the African market?
Yes, please. I'm speaking about the flip side of it. You are focused more on companies who want to establish in Germany. Would you also look at companies who want to, from Germany or the DACH region or EU, move into the African countries where I cover about 19 of these countries? Thank you.
I mean, to be fair, we don't know anything about the African markets. I mean, I don't know, Norman. If you have some experience, I think Norman.
That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm proposing it.
Yeah, in Asia, etc. So I think we did have some customers that are moving into other European markets, so Italy, Spain, France, etc. And we have some experience like expanding to the UK, France, etc. And we have also some people on the ground that are speak the language, etc. But yeah, African market not so much, to be fair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. That's fine.
Maybe we can go a little bit into when you think about what would be good ways for companies entering the German market. Do you have any recommendations that you usually share with your customers that you use, or say they should have look at that, maybe especially for Berlin?
So again, I think use our framework. Really think about your ideal customer profile, how they buy. So are you in the small segment, small company segment, mid-market, enterprise? What are the involved people? So what are the involved personas, etc. So who is the decision maker? Typically, what do they have as a job title? Who is an influencer? Then look at your competition and understand how you are better, right? What are your USPs against those local competitors? And then how you sell the product, right? And then from that, you can derive the go-to-market strategy. So are you going more into this outbound strategy, which is often used, for example, in the enterprise mid-market segment? You can create very exact lists of companies that are your target and go with your value proposition towards those companies. Or is it more inbound strategy? So you create content around it. Is it more events heavy? So we are in Germany, for example, the BAV software that I've been talking about, the pension scheme software. They, for example, are very big on events because there's like huge fairs in Germany where the HR folks are going to, right? So there's one in South, there's one in the North, and so they're very heavy on events. Is it a paid strategy, right? So are you going more into a LinkedIn, a Meta, etc.? So Meta obviously more for the smaller companies, LinkedIn again more for enterprise mid-market, but again maybe not the traditional ones. They're not on LinkedIn. So you might want to do some offline events as well, right, with a partner, for example. So I think it really depends who's your target audience or who is the segment that you're going after. And then in terms of Berlin, I think Berlin is amazing for tech. Berlin has a lot of networks, like obviously Berlin partner Germantech, but also like campuses like Delta, right? That is very heavy on tech. There's Merantix campus, which is very heavy on AI. So there, obviously, you can find a lot of connection with like-minded companies. Again, if you're more in the automotive, you might want to be more south and not in Berlin. So again, there's tons of networks, I would say, in Berlin. Like for sustainability, I saw there's a lot of sustainability companies. There's meetups. There's these campuses, etc. There's co-working spaces, obviously, a lot where you can also find connections and network.
Do you think it is important to get yourself out and into the community in Berlin, especially when you're testing your product? Would you recommend that for a very early stage idea or startup?
I mean, if you're a tech company, I think Berlin is definitely a good place to start. I mean, we are in the mostly in the tech space. But again, if it's, I think it can be easier, of course, if you want to do, or if you have to sell offline, right? So, and you want to be really close to the customer, and your customers are in Berlin. So, for example, you're selling to tech startups or scale-ups, right? There's like a huge base here. You can visit them. You can be offline and connect with them on a personal level. I think this can be easier than to start from abroad and not be on the ground, right? But again, I would say that depends really on your segment, on your industry, on who you are selling to.
Okay, we've got the question from Munish in here, which is a challenging question for me, so I'm happily pass it over to Norman. The two top books that you recommend one to read for both sales and marketing, especially when it comes as self-employed in Germany? I could not answer that, but Norman, that's one for you.
Now you got me on the wrong foot because I barely read any German books. But if you go on my LinkedIn profile, I actually have a blog post where I say it's one of the older ones, but I frequently update is, which is basically my top list of books that I for tech marketers or so, but I think they apply actually for everything. So I really think everyone should have written or should have read The Qualified Sales Leader, because it's just an amazing book by John McMahon. That's also what all the venture capitalists recommend. Then on the marketing side, I think I have I really like the introductions to product marketing, but there's also
Revenue architecture.
There's also
is a
monetizing
very good one.
innovation, which is the founder of Simon Kutscher, basically wrote a book about how to price in the SaaS world. That's also an amazing book. But I would encourage you look at the LinkedIn post. I think I have a list now of 20 top books, and I only add the books that I really, really love. Anastasia, which one do you want to throw in?
The revenue architecture is also a nice one by Jaco. So that's like a standard one for more enterprise mid-market, I would say. Go-to-market. It's not Germany specific, but it gives a nice structure on how to think about.
I like the idea. Maybe we should write a book.
Yeah, and actually we do have a newsletter as well. The guide to B2B. The B2B Practitioners newsletter, so guide to B2B, where we also publish a lot of useful things.
Okay, I think that's definitely a good one. Maybe you can put a link in here so that we can all sign up for that.
We do have a, sorry, Steffi, to interrupt. We have a raised hand from Karina. That's quite a long time. So Karina, do you have a question for us?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the talk. Actually, I have a question about like a B2C market, even though I know maybe you're more focused on B2B market, because what is the tips about going to the market about B2C? Because I feel like in here, the people is more conservative and also more price sensitive. So what is the best strategy besides to understand your competitor? You have our own USP, and what else we can do better to go to the market when we do, like for example, the marketing or something, when we focus on the B2C products.
Who are you targeting exactly in the B2C space?
Actually, I more target for the family, because I'm building the education product. So it's more like, it's like a two channel, let's say. It's I target to the parent who pay about that, but actually the actual user will be the child.
Okay. Yeah, I've worked, for example, for Krü, which is a healthcare app for telemedicine. And they were targeting parents a lot, and it was mainly through performance marketing. So very heavy on Meta, very heavy on YouTube, and obviously localizing it for the German market, and pairing it with some brand marketing as well. So it was a mix of really performance-based conversion ads and branding ads, so where you optimize for impressions and frequency, And so basically this mix kind of was working quite well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Karina, just be aware that there's so if you're in the B2C space, you need to be aware of the Digital Accessibility Act that started in Q2 this year. So you need to offer the option on your website and in the app that so visually impaired people can also access it. That's not a requirement for B2B. You will have also somewhat stricter requirements with GDPR. So I know quite a number of B2B companies that don't necessarily get double opt-in. And it works for them because if no one complains, then it's fine. Also, to be honest, the law has relaxed a bit, or at least the enforcement of the law. But and then children, you may have additional requirements to protect your children. So I'm not a lawyer, but look into this. The one thing that I wanted to add on the acquisition side, if you look at Sofa Tour and the like, so there's learning platforms for kids. I think they do quite aggressive awareness advertising in the performance way, be it on YouTube, Instagram, and so on, because they address the parents so that the parents understand, oh, there's a value for the kids. Yeah. I'm a father of two, and I don't want my kids to fail.
Okay, yeah, it's good to know because actually the Sofa Tutor will be one of my direct competitor. Yeah, so it's good to hear about someone mention about this.
Yeah, we should go back to what Anastasia said. Look at what they offer, yeah, and what you can do better there. So they are pretty common after COVID or Corona. Everybody who had a child and had to stay at home, and so look, there's in my personal opinion, a lot of things that can be improved in that platform. Okay, is here another question from the audience to our experts? Really dig into them. Yeah, so usually they charge us for these kinds of questions.
I might have a question to squeeze in. So, do you see a trend that international companies increasingly choose to partner with local service providers when entering the German market? So, for example, by outsourcing part of their own go-to-market activities. So, as a full stop service provider, as an external service provider, I mean.
Yeah, we typically do work with companies that outsource, like even bigger ones, like the MSP software provider that I was talking about. They just don't have a local person for marketing in Germany, so they employed us to be their feet on the ground here to localize some of the ads, the website, but also think about like what are potential channels here. And they did have like a salesperson that speaks German, so we were basically supporting that salesperson with pipeline. By conducting, for example, local webinars with partners like Heise, etc., which is very big in the IT space, and channel partner, which is very big also in the IT space, where you can send newsletters. So they have already a big audience of managed service providers that you can reach through that channel. So it doesn't always have to be like performance marketing and whatnot. I don't know if there's a trend, but we certainly do work with companies that are coming from the US, for example, and wanting to expand in the DACH region or the German market, but also for companies that are in Germany and want to go into the Italian, French, Spanish market.
Yeah, I think that could be a really an easy step to go into a new market because of yeah, you have a partner on your side, and I think it's quite overwhelming sometimes to. Of course, there's a lot of networks, a lot of meetups, a lot of things you have to consider when you're entering the new market. Not only your strategy. There's so much formal things to reconsider. And I think that's really important to have somebody on your side. That could be a Berlin partner to offering a quite a big network here for Berlin, but also to have people here to help you with staffing, with HR, with legal things. I think it's really important to have a partner.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I wanted to add is, in my experience, if you have an established international brand, then it works without a partner. So let's take an example like Stripe. They just done build their local ecosystem. If you're in a space where you may or may not have, you will need a partner, be it for brand associations or you work with the local Deloittes and so on that introduce you, or with the local, some other brand that gives you the validity in the market. That's even when you're in Germany and you want to get branch out in a different sector, always good to have someone who has already credibility. What I then notice that depends on the self-confidence of the sales team. So when they are overly confident, I often hear, oh no, we know Germany, we do it ourselves, or we know Europe. I think this mindset has changed in the US to a certain extent. So because now people understand, oh, Europe is different from the US. So they go more to local partners. And I think this makes sense. What you have to think about is then the contractual agreement, how much of your own freedom to operate you want to see to the partner. But I think in any case, having someone who either helps you with sales or augments, the best thing is for me always value added resales. When you have a couple of people who actually, you create something bigger with them and you need them anyway, be it the implementation partner, be it the solution designer and so on. It makes sense because it gives you more credibility in the German market. Again, that's different if you just sell a SaaS solution. So then me as a single owner or the two of us as consultants, we have 10 people. We don't look into too much as long as it's compliant, as long as it does the deal.
Okay, thanks. Delma, you have a question?
My question is integration. Oh. Hello?
Yes, we hear you now. Delma, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Thank you. My question is around the topic that is being discussed, which is partnerships, localization. You mentioned, potentially HR, potentially customer support. In particular, this same topic, but as it relates to product development. Currently, we operate in the United Arab Emirates, the UK, and currently going through the process of starting a company in Germany as we speak. And so we're thinking about product build as well, right? So how different would you say the German user kind of expects the product itself to be? Like translation into German, is it kind of a different user experience? Should we maybe get local support on kind of that product roadmap development? Any thoughts around that?
Norman, you're on mute.
Delma, I give you a really horrible example, and I mentioned a company before, Stripe. They are worldwide renowned or infamous for just developing US-centrically. There are still a lot of happy customers, but they really messed up with me and they haven't even responded in 3 months, and then they fixed it at some point. So the point that I think it comes with the credibility, and from what I understand, you're in a healthcare space. I think that probably augments that you need to really think about what is needed and who are you selling to. So if it comes, so I would at least look into, are there any major differences? So I would probably start with a small audit, just checking what does the UX or UI specialist, or maybe in your case it's more the legal side. I would look into what are the are there any important things that you need to fix? So I would probably start with the audience, the audit, and then think about what is needed. But it definitely makes sense to look into certain things. So Anastasia always brings this nice example. Whenever I get interviewed about the topic of ERP, the question comes up, why don't you internationalize? Yeah, because it's super difficult. If you want to internationalize an ERP system, you need to have the connections to the banks. You need to have the connections to all the marketplaces. And guess what? Every single country in Europe has a different marketplace that you may want to be connected to. So in Germany, there's suddenly Otto Kaufland and whatever next to eBay, Amazon, and so on. So I think I would look at the requirements. I would interview the customers and then build on this. There's also, depending on, I'm not sure you described what you're doing, but are you selling to the big players or the small players? If you sell to the smaller players, there's a bigger need for probably being more German if you're selling to the bigger ones. Although healthcare, I think in general, is very traditional, I would say, in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in healthcare for this app that was actually from Sweden, and they internationalized into France, UK, Germany, and I was responsible for the German market, and it's very, very particular, right? So you have private insurance, public insurance. So depending on if you're selling to B2C or kind of hospitals or doctors, and there are certain intricacies. So, for example, in the B2C space, you cannot obviously target based on medical conditions. In the B2B space, if you want to go for like hospitals, there's RFP processes for the bigger ones. If you're targeting doctors, that's also some intricacies on how you can market to them. But there's like, for example, Deutsches Ärzteblatt, which is very local German-based print paper that is still read a lot by the doctors. But for example, Dr. Lib, if you know this scheduling app for doctors, they went crazy on visiting doctors in their offices or in their practices and speaking to them directly. So it was very offline, but this is how they succeeded to enter. So and they definitely localized the product because it had so many different regulatory requirements in the healthcare space.
Delma, are you already in Germany?
Not yet. I'm nearby, but we recently were accepted to Green Healthcare Accelerator out of Berlin. So we will be there in like a week.
Because one of my very good friends from university, so some 25 years ago, she is running Women in Healthcare. So, but she's not based in Berlin, but she's quite often in Berlin for, I think there's even some sort of Stammtisch of Women of Healthcare in Berlin because they often need to be also very close to politics.
But you're doing climate tech, Delma, no?
Yes, so what we do is we're a marketplace. So currently we have about 80 listed climate technologies globally. Some of them are German. I would say roughly around 4 as of today. These climate technologies range quite extensively. So it could be anything from an HVAC system to an environmental management software to heat to energy, kind of geothermal localized product. So quite a big range. What we do is we onboard these climate tech solutions. We verify that their technology is market ready, what market they operate in, various technical specs. So we do collect that data. Currently, we are using cloud software and cloud hosting under Google. And then we facilitate knowledge between the climate technology and the buyer. So for example, in this case, if a hospital is looking to reduce their energy consumption, and they want to maybe take the waste that they generate on a day-to-day basis and convert that into energy. They're looking for obviously some apparatus, some technical mechanism to do that. They would go into our marketplace. They would say, hey, we want to reduce our energy consumption in our hospital by, let's say, net zero target goals, 20%, 50%, etc. And then we would give them a list of the top matches, whether in Germany or abroad as well. So we're two-sided from that perspective. We serve
Then I would probably go more towards the climate tech to the players or the associations there and try to leverage them to a certain extent. Was a bit confused or I overread it because I think you said something that you were targeting the healthcare space right now. Or did I misread this?
Yeah, so our end buyer would be the healthcare hospital space, right? So we have two buyers. We have the climate tech technologies, which are startups, scale-ups, kind of mid-size innovators, engineers. And then we have the institutional enterprises, which are the hospitals, the healthcare centers, the clinics. And our goal is to match them to be the link of credibility.
Yeah, marketplace is always the hardest, I would say. So because you have two different ideal customer profiles, and you have to sustain basically two go-to-market strategies almost. So it's definitely a tough one. But I mean, for hospitals, I think there's like clear lists of hospitals that it's pretty easy to find out. But I think it's not so easy to get into them because some do have also RFPs, the bigger ones.
Is there somebody else in this group who would like to take Norman and Anastasia up for a really detailed debrief? Otherwise, I would start to summarize a little bit and go to the takeaways. Hands up now. In the chat is another question. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, there's also a network. Cool. So I put you on the spot again, Norman, Anastasia. Yeah. And don't be mad with me. So if I have the question, is it necessary to have a legal entity before selling? Yeah. In a short, precise way, is it necessary or not? And if not, how would I bridge the gap then?
Not necessary.
Okay.
But so I think the bigger your target customers get, desto the more important it gets. But otherwise, you can still solicit interest. Just be aware, the bigger the company, they are focused on compliance, and the more they feel secure if they have a local partner. But in general, if you just sell a software company, software service or whatever, it works pretty well without.
Perfect. And German-speaking sales and customer support probably falls into the same line, yeah. But for the guys who are looking for the market here, market entrance.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're selling to startups in Berlin, especially, it's very international, right? So you don't necessarily need that because people are also speaking English. But if you are in the mid-market, I would say for sure you need it.
Okay. Fastest way to build trust with a German buyer.
Localization, for sure. So having a good website or even landing page, right, with all the information needed, with some proof points. So local proof points, ideally. Of course, I know someone asked if they can use social proof from other markets. I mean, you have to, in a way, if you're starting out, there's no other way. But as soon as you have your first German customer, I think it's you have to get the case study going. So really write down a case study with this German customer to use for other buyers. And then also you might even connect this buyer with the potential buyer to talk to each other. That's also what we see a lot, to get a bit of trust going. Yeah, otherwise, German imprint, right? You need to have an imprint, data privacy statement. So that needs to be there on the website.
Can I dig into the social proof? So you said customer testimonials, customer stories. Like, how would I, as a newbie, challenge this to get get a person to do a customer story, is there a minimum that you would say a social proof? Would a quote be enough? Would it be a full-blown customer case study? What would work for the beginning for me?
I mean, social proof is not just customer stories or customer case studies. We typically say proof points once you do your positioning, right? How you're different against your the local competitors in the German market. We typically also say you need to have objective proof points. So, for example, X times faster or whatever. So some kind of metrics that you can that they can validate. So and that you can obviously, once you start, you can take from your local market as a starter, right? So you can say in your local market you're X times faster or more efficient or whatever the metric is. And then yeah, with case studies, typically you can only do a case study once the company is successful with your product, has I don't know, achieved their goals, right? That you have set out with your customer success team. And then typically they're really happy to agree to do unless you're in the cybersecurity space where it's really hard to get customer case studies. But once you have a case in Germany, I think, which is successful, they're happy with your product, they have achieved what they wanted to achieve. I think they're normally they're quite happy to do a case. And I just want to say that please make it as quantifiable as possible. So I see also a lot of customer case studies where it's just like description of what they've been doing, but not really the outcome. But I think what really helps is to have a proper outcome. Okay, with this software, I was able to achieve X more revenue or whatever it is you wanted to achieve.
Okay, great. And one last question digging into that. Buyer speaking to buyer, is a pilot or putting my potential customer together with an ambassador, is that something that you think is in a later sales cycle, something that could make a difference?
I've seen this more often in the US, but it can be deployed in Germany as well as a reference. I think this I would try it. It's certainly not usual, but I would bring it if you sell something more valuable. I would definitely throw it in. Hey, would you like to hear from customer? And then they are actually quite open. So I always say SMEs buy from SMEs. But the same is actually, it's more valuable in the enterprise space. Hey, why didn't you exchange this? It's in the end another way of customer referral or reference. I would definitely, if you have this opportunity, use it. Just make sure. I think that's one thing that I found quite interesting. In the US, so on the East Coast, on the East and West Coast, that's typically the more forward-thinking in the US. You can introduce them to a reference that is from a different industry, and they will see the parallels. Germany is more like the Midwest, where they want to have a reference exactly from their own sector, from their own. So don't expect someone from machinery accepting a retail reference, even though it's the same use case. So they really want to know, I want to talk to a machinery company.